Well, happy Wednesday evening. This is a ham radio class. If you've just stumbled upon us on YouTube, it's a beginning amateur radio class for those who in the United States want to get their first ham radio license. And we're nearly done. We're proceeding ahead in this book. I always show it. This is the American Radio Relay League License Manual for Amateur Radio for the Technician class. That's the beginning license. This is the 5th edition book. This is the one you want. And this is the one that we've been working through. And tonight we're going to be doing in Chapter 8. But before we do that, I want to make an announcement. If you have a high-frequency shortwave radio at your house and it can receive single sideband transmissions, well, this weekend, starting Friday evening at about 8 o'clock Eastern Time, or 0 Zulu time Saturday morning, is the biggest contest of the year. Single sideband contest. It's the, go ahead and take the laptop, CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. It will be on all of the amateur radio contest bands, 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. And the bands will be jam-packed with tens of thousands of amateur radio operators in this contest, doing the contest exchange with their computers, logging the contacts. I'll be one of them, and I'm shooting for a high goal this year, so we'll see if we'll make it. I'll report back to you next week. But if you have a radio at home and you got a chance to listen in, I highly urge you to take the opportunity to listen into the ham bands this weekend, or go on to a software-defined radio. I'll try to send some links in the email tomorrow that you can be listening this weekend and just hear the craziness. It's crazy, it's chaos, but it's a lot of fun. And so crazy people like me, we like to get into this. So that's coming up this weekend. All right, your word for tonight is penultimate. Penultimate. I didn't know what the heck was that word. I only learned it because when working for the Voice of America, we bought transmitters from the Marconi Corporation. And the last stage is called, the final stage, all right? And the stage before the final stage is called the penultimate stage. It's the one before the last. Well, we're in Chapter 8. This is the penultimate chapter in the book, the one before the last one. So tonight we're going to be going through operating regulations. The plan is then for next week we will finish the book with Chapter 9, safety. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and take a practice test together. And finally, on November the 5th, if you can bear it, if you want to come back, we'll take 2 practice tests together. You'll grade your own paper. You don't have to share, don't have to let anybody know how you're doing. But that's the plan. So for this penultimate chapter tonight, Chapter 8, we're going to be talking about operating regulations. And there are a bunch of sections, I think 6 in this chapter, but they're short. And so I'm promising you I'm going to get you out early tonight. Hey, all right. So let's get started. So in the United States, here's what a copy of a license looks like for amateur radio. You don't get it in the mail anymore. You actually have to go online to the database and download a PDF version of it. But a U.S. amateur radio license is 2 licenses in one. It's one for you as an operator. You have operator privileges based on the class of your license. And it also authorizes you to build a station, an amateur radio station. So 2 licenses in one. And there's a rule that an amateur radio station, whether it's yours or someone else's, always must have someone as the control operator. And the control operator is the person who is in charge and responsible to make sure that the station does not cause any interference to any other authorized services. So stations always have to have a control operator, and that control operator has to be someone who's licensed, and has to, or could be a foreign alien who has a license in their home country, and there's a reciprocal operating agreement that they can operate in the United States. The control operator, again, is the person responsible for station operations when the station is transmitting. That's the key. They must prevent harmful interference, and we'll talk more about interference as we move along here. Now, it's assumed to be the station licensee. If it's your station, you're assumed to be the control operator, but you could designate control operator status to somebody else. And it's the control operator's class of license that sets the operating conditions. If you have your technician license, but you invite me over and say, Gary, I want you to try my new ICOM IC7300, and I'm going to designate you as the control operator. So I could operate your station, your radio, your antennas and whatnot. I could go up to the 20-meter band where you don't have privileges. And as long as I operate using my call sign, I can operate your station because I have an extra class license, and it's my class of license that sets the operating conditions. You don't think about it, but repeaters do have a control operator. They just might not be someone who's on site, but the control operator is the one who's responsible for the repeater's operations to ensure that no interference takes place. So if I was to come over to your house and you designate me as the control operator, you're not off the hook. It's a shared responsibility that exists then between the control operator, the designated control operator, and the station licensee. It's 50-50 in that case. So when can an amateur station operate without a control operator? No, always must have a control operator. All right, so here's a hypothetical. Let's see if we can puzzle this one out. So can a technician class licensee be named the control operator of an extra class station? So if you get your technician license, and you will, come over to my station. Can I designate you as the control operator? And then can you proceed to operate in the extra class portion of the band? Yes or no? What do you think? Remember, it's the operator's license level that sets the conditions.
Yes, but no.
It would be no, yes, because you have a technician license. Now, you could operate in any of the frequency ranges that technicians have privileges, that 200 kilohertz that exists in the 10-meter band, or you could do Morse code on 80, 40, and 15 in those bands. But no, you could not operate using your call sign, but in the extra class portion of the band. That's not allowed. All right, it's kind of obvious, but the control point is the location at which the control operator function is performed. Now, that used to be pretty obvious because stations were basic and you'd sit down at the radio and you'd flip the switches and you'd operate it and whatnot. But nowadays, with remote operation, so you can control your station from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away over the internet, well, the control point shifts from the station location to where the control function is being performed. So just keep that in mind. Already some questions. All right, let's see how we do. So when may an amateur station transmit without a control operator?
Delta.
Delta, never. You always have to have a control operator. And who must designate the station control operator?
Alpha.
Yeah, it's the station licensee. And what determines the transmitting frequency privileges of an amateur station?
Delta.
It is Delta. It's the class of operator license that is held by the control operator. And what is an amateur station's control point?
Charlie.
You see that? Yeah, Charlie. It's the location at which the control operator function is performed. Typically sitting in front of the radio, but it could be elsewhere if you're operating remotely. And when, under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be the control operator of a station operating in an amateur extra class band segment?
Alpha.
At no time, because the technician class does not give you frequency privileges in an extra class band segment. So when the control operator is not the station licensee, who is responsible for the proper operation?
Delta.
Charlie.
Delta.
Reed, yeah, Reed, it's Delta. 50-50. Remember, both the control operator and the station licensee are responsible.
Yeah.
And who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station?
Delta.
Yeah, that's right. They assume that the station licensee is the control operator. If you're going to designate someone else, you probably could make a note. If you kept a paper log, that would be the place to do it. Maybe you have an electronic log if that's possible, but just make a note of it. Okay, section 8.2, identification. Here is the rule, and this is the same rule, I believe, for GMRS and other services. Station ID should be done every 10 minutes in a conversation and at the end of a contact. And I'm just going to move over here and mute everybody in the Zoom classroom. So you can go on a repeater, for example, and start talking and carry on a conversation, and that's perfectly legal, except that at the 10-minute point, thereabouts, you need to throw in your call sign, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. That's a legal ID. And then when you're done at the end of the conversation, whether it's 10 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, you use your amateur radio call sign to identify the transmission. If you're doing test transmissions to tune up an antenna or something like that, what you should do is do the test transmissions. They probably won't last 10 minutes. And at the conclusion, somehow identify your station, voice, Morse code, however you can do that. The exception to this rule is for radio control for models. It's not possible to do that. What do you think of that B-52 model? That's something. Whoa. All right. So 10 minutes, after 10 minutes, and at the end of a conversation, that's when you do your ID. And you use your FCC-issued amateur radio call sign. But what if you're going to be volunteering for public service, maybe a marathon that's going on in your town, and your local ham club is going to provide communications for the marathon, and no one knows exactly who's going to be where. They don't know the call signs. So they may designate what are known as tactical call signs. Starting line, midway point, finishing line. So if you need to get communication to a particular point, you can call them using the tactical call sign. And they can identify themselves also using the tactical call sign, with the caveat that after 10 minutes, then they need to also throw in their amateur radio call sign. You do too. And then at the end of the conversation, this is a finish line, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Tactical call sign and your amateur radio call sign. All right, more rules. Morse code is always allowed for station identification, which is why on radio repeaters, you'll hear radio repeaters, most of them identify using Morse code. Some radio repeaters use voice identification, but that's unusual. If you're going to be doing an identification, a station ID, the phonetic alphabet is recommended. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee would be fine. If you're going to be operating outside of your region, this used to be a rule, it's now just courtesy. If I had my old call sign, which was Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee, but I was operating in Foreland, where I am right now, the rule used to be I had to identify as Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee stroke 4, or Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee slant 4, or Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee stroke 4, which one? Any of those three you could do. Or you could, sometimes you'll hear them say portable 4, but that slash mark is important. Now, The other thing is you can use a self-assigned call indicator. I've not really heard anyone do this, but you could say Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee stroke delighted because you're happy. Nobody does that, but okay. However, I couldn't use Whiskey 8 Echo Echo Yankee stroke DL. Why? Because DL is an amateur radio prefix for Germany. And that's kind of saying that I'm portable in Germany, which I'm not. So it's just kind of an esoteric rule, but I want you to know about it. Because your assigned call sign indicator can't conflict with FCC rules or international prefixes. So you're going to get your technician license here coming up soon. Your test is scheduled, I hope. And then after you get your technician license, and as soon as you appear in the FCC database, when the government resumes functioning, then you're a licensed amateur radio operator, and you can move on to the next level and think about the general class. And when you upgrade from technician to general class, and we do have an online general class starting in January, so you can watch for that. Again, if you pass your general class test and you're in the database, then you are a general. But even after you pass your test at the test session, even before you're in the database, you can operate in the general class portion of the high frequency bands, for example. And you do that by using your technician class call sign, Whiskey November 8 Golf Alpha Juliet stroke AG. I think it means acting general, but okay, I don't know exactly. So you use your technician class call sign stroke AG, and you can operate in the high frequency assignments that the general class can use immediately, even before you're in the database. If you upgrade to extra later on, you can do the same thing with AE, stroke AE, acting extra. So this is something you can get on the air and use your new privileges right away when you upgrade. More questions? So what do the FCC rules state regarding the use of a phonetic alphabet for station identification in the amateur radio service?
Bravo.
It is strongly encouraged, absolutely. And when may an amateur station transmit without identifying on the air? What is the exception?
Delta.
Delta.
When transmitting signals to control model craft, aircraft, boats, etc. And how often must you identify with your FCC assigned call sign when using technical call signs such as race headquarters?
Charlie.
Charlie.
The rule doesn't change. It's at the end of each communication and every 10 minutes during a communication. And when are you required to transmit your assigned call sign?
Delta.
Alpha.
See, no, it's not alpha,
No,
and I want to point out it's
delta.
not at the
Delta.
beginning of each contact. It's
No.
at the end, so it's delta.
Delta.
Yeah,
Delta.
and you won't get both of those questions. You may get one or the other, but so they phrase them in different ways. But yeah, at least every 10 minutes, and during a conversation, and at the end of a conversation. So what language may you use for identification when operating in a single sideband phone subband?
Charlie.
You have a U.S. license, and so far the English language is the official language of the United States, so yes, you identify in English. And what method of call sign identification is required for station transmitting phone signals? So you want to ID
Bravo.
your station.
Bravo.
Yes, you can send your call sign using Morse code, CW, or using phone. There used to be some old transceivers, I don't know who made them, they used to have an ID button, and you could push and it would actually send your call sign. If you had it programmed, it would send Morse code. But I can't find those anymore, but okay. So which of the following self-assigned indicators are acceptable when using a phone transmission? Read carefully.
Delta.
Delta.
So you can say KL7CC stroke, whiskey 3, KL7CC slant, KL7CC slash, all of those are possible. And which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions?
Alpha.
Yeah, eventually you're required to identify yourself. All right, interference, section 8.3. I told you there are a lot of sections, but they're fairly short. So this is the definition of interference. That which seriously degrades, obstructs, or repeatedly interrupts a radio communications service that is operating in accordance with the radio regulations. Okay, so we're a radio service. Amateur radio is an official class of service, is designated by the FCC. So is business band, so is aircraft, so is public safety. All of those have their own designations, but they're operating in accordance with the radio regulations, and we must prevent any interference to those services. Also, as a class of service, we have some protections. I'll talk about that here in a second. So interference, there's interference to you, coming from an outside source, and there's interference from you. And in the from you category, the most important thing that we want to make sure that we prevent is interference to radio navigation services, things that aircraft are using or other navigation systems that might be used by boating or things like that. We want to make sure that public craft don't have any problems there. And you think, well, the aircraft band is we're up there 170 megahertz or whatever it is. I'll just stay away from there. That's not enough, because there are communications circuits for aviation and whatnot, and direction indicating equipment and stuff like that operates in a wide spectrum. So you always want to make sure that your station is up to date and not generating interference. Use type accepted equipment, and if you, at all in doubt, have somebody in your club, if they can measure the equipment, make sure that it's operating okay. New equipment that comes from a manufacturer is tested rigorously and should not have a problem. All right, come back to me just for a second. I talk about this, and it's an unfortunate part of the hobby. But as in any group of people, you're going to have those who are mature, rational, reasonable people, and you're going to have adults who really are children who never grew up. And so there are hams that meet this last criteria, and sometimes they cause what we call DQRM. QRM is man-made interference. Remember the Q code? And so D stands for deliberate. They actually try to interfere with ongoing communications. Come on back to the laptop. It's never legal. It's not rational. It's not, but it does exist. My rule of thumb is if you're being interfered with or you hear this or whatnot, just use the big knob and QSY, change to another frequency. Now, you're going to run into this. Remember, when we get on the air, we listen. Then we ask, is the frequency in use? And you give your call sign. You do that a few times, and then you begin calling CQ. It's going to happen that you're going to start calling CQ, and somebody's going to come out of nowhere and say, hey, you're on my frequency. We have a net that's starting here in 5 minutes. You're on my frequency. Well, no one has ownership of any particular frequency. I just want to clear that up right now. There's tradition. Nets meet on a certain frequency at a certain time. Okay, that's got some weight. But most nets have a backup plan. If for whatever reason their normal frequency is not usable, they have a backup frequency. But okay, if this happens to you, common sense and courtesy should prevail. That's the rule. And again, use that big knob, QSY, find another clear frequency, and start again. Okay, here's some more questions. We're moving right along. So when is willful interference to other amateur radio stations permitted?
Bravo.
At no time. Yeah, that's a no-no. And which of the following applies when two stations transmitting on the same frequency interfere with each other?
Alpha.
Obviously, you argue and you argue, and the guy that's wins the argument wins. No, it's alpha. Yeah, you should negotiate and can say, okay, you have the frequency, and I'll QSY. Be an adult. Third-party communications. It's amazing to me that we're still talking about this. Here we are in the 21st century. I heard a TV show the other day, and they were talking about a house that was built in the 1900s. Wait a minute, I was built in the 1900s, but okay. Remember telephones? Landline telephones? It was a real thing to make a long-distance phone call, I remember. You had sometimes early on, you had to book the call ahead of time. You had to call the operator and say, I'd like to book a call to New York. And they'd have to clear a line for you in order to make that phone call. It might have even been before direct dial. So the phone companies made a lot of money out of long distance phone calls. No more so than in international phone calls. International phone calls were money makers for the phone companies. This is the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications in Monrovia, Liberia. Liberia was my first overseas assignment for the Voice of America. And this is where I went, to this building, to apply for my amateur radio license in Liberia. And because I had an extra class license at the time, they issued me a Liberian license, Echo Lima 2 Delta Bravo. And that was my call sign there. What I'm leading up to is something that we call third-party traffic. A third party is you are in communication with another amateur radio operator in another country. You're party number one, they're party number two. The third party is maybe your spouse or a friend or something else. And if that spouse or friend says, hey, could you pass a message to the other person? Don't do it until you've consulted this URL here in the middle. Let me turn on my laser pointer as soon as I find my cursor. So the American Radio Relay League keeps this URL updated with countries with which the United States has a third-party operating agreement. And what that means is it's okay for you to pass that comment of the third party on to the foreign station. Otherwise, no, you just got to keep it between the two of you if there is no third-party operating agreement. It's kind of funny. There's no third-party operating agreement between the United States and Germany, for example. So technically, it's illegal if you were to pass a message along. So this is what the website looks like, and you can go down and take a look at the countries that we do have third-party agreements with. It was the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications that were trying to protect their revenue. That's why this exists. It's only if it's allowed by governments of the countries involved. Okay, here we are in 2025. We have something called the Internet, WhatsApp. You can make all sorts of phone calls internationally, bypassing this completely. It's still a rule in amateur radio, so we need to know about it. And we have to answer some test questions about it. So let's see how we can do here. So which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under the control of a licensed amateur operator?
Bravo.
Yeah, the foreign station must be in a country with which the U.S. has a third-party agreement. And what is the definition of third-party communications?
Alpha.
Alpha.
It is alpha. It's a message from a control operator to another amateur station control operator on behalf of a third party or another person. All right, moving right along. I said there are 6 sections. We're already up to 8.5. Remote and automatic control. So let's start first with automatic control. This is something that radio repeaters use. And radio repeaters are the things that you, with your little HT, you can talk up to the mountaintop and it rebroadcasts your transmission out on a different frequency. So repeaters and then packet radio digipeaters use automatic control. And automatic control is defined as using devices and procedures that ensure compliance with FCC rules. So they're using controllers that minimize or inhibit interference. And repeaters, as we've said before, have a control operator, but he or she is off-site. So that's what automatic control is all about. Not to be confused with remote control. With the advent of the internet and various boxes and interfaces and things, you can actually take the control head off of your Kenwood TS 480 and plug it into a remote rig box here, and the remote rig box goes out to the internet, and the main body of the radio is in another country, and it all just works. And so you can operate that station remotely. So that's using devices to interface to the internet. Some manufacturers, like Flex Radio, my Flex 6600, have it built right into the radio. In fact, they say that the radio is actually a radio server. It's designed to be connected to remotely and operated from a distance. So keep that in mind. But remember, as we talked about before, the control point, that's the location where the control function takes place. And it's defined as local control no matter where the control point is. So the control point could be at the radio, or it could be wherever you're remotely controlling the radio. So we mentioned radio repeaters, and here's our pictorial of ham A there on the left transmitting up to the repeater and coming down to ham B. Note that repeater operators are not responsible for transmission content. It is the originating station that is responsible. So if they're using profanity or other things that are not allowed by regulation, it's not the repeater operator that will be held liable. It will be the originating station. Okay, questions? So which of the following is an example of automatic control?
Alpha.
Bravo.
Alpha.
Automatic control is alpha.
Alpha.
These are with using equipment and procedures so that it doesn't cause interference. So that's automatic control. All right. In contrast to, which of the following are required for remote control operation? Read carefully.
Delta.
Charlie.
Delta.
Charlie is true, but Bravo is also true. The control operator must be, I'll start with Alpha, the control operator must be at the control point, no matter where the control point is, all right? The control operator is required at all times, so that's a standard, and the control operator indirectly manipulates the controls remotely. So all of those. So the correct answer in this case is D. And which of the following is an example of remote control as defined in our amateur radio regulations, Part 97?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Operating a station over the internet is remote control. And who is accountable if a repeater inadvertently retransmits communications that violates the FCC rules?
Alpha.
Alpha.
It's the control operator of the originating station. All right. Section 8.6, prohibited transmissions. We're almost done with the chapter, believe it or not. I told you I'd get you out early tonight. So it is generally prohibited for amateur radio stations to carry on communication with U.S. military stations. There is an exception, Armed Forces Day, which is the third Saturday in May, and it's the only time that amateur stations may communicate with U.S. military stations. And it will be advertised online and in QST magazine. The military stations will be listening on amateur radio frequencies. And so you'll be transmitting on amateur radio frequencies, and you'll be given the military frequencies that you should listen on to hear their transmissions on their frequencies. So this cross-band communications can take place on Armed Forces Day. That's the only time that that's allowed. All right, can I use amateur radio to sell my equipment? Well, yeah. In fact, some nets have regular swap and shop announcement days. The repeater group in Greenville, South Carolina on Wednesday nights has a swap and shop. And you can talk about the sale of amateur radio equipment to other amateurs. It has to be on an irregular basis. You can't have a ham radio store. Okay, so that's one thing. We talked about obscenity. That's prohibited, and we all know what that is, so just don't do that. Retransmission of other stations is prohibited, so you can't rebroadcast CNN or something else. There is an exception for space stations, auxiliary stations, and repeaters, because that is in large part their job to repeat transmissions. So that's the exception. And you can't operate for money. The 1934 term is pecuniary. You can't have a pecuniary or cash interest in making money from your station. The exception always cited is for education. If you're a teacher at a high school, for example, and you want to use amateur radio in your classroom to help teach physics and science, well, you're going to get paid by the school system. But you're not making money off of amateur radio. You're just utilizing it as another tool to teach students. So that's the exception. But you can't operate your station for money, because all of those post and telecommunications guys were really worried that you're going to eat their lunch. And then along came the internet. All right. Prohibitions. You can't transmit music. This is an old rule. I'm old enough to remember. Except when it is incidental to the retransmission of manned spacecraft activities. Where does that come from? Back in the day, when the first space program, a manned space program, Mercury, was started, and then we had Gemini and Apollo, and if you had orbital space flights that were going on, they would actually have the astronauts all sleep at the same time. And NASA back then also gave amateur radio stations the right to rebroadcast their mission control channel. So that was an exception, that you could rebroadcast NASA's mission control. So amateur radio operators could tune in on amateur radio frequencies and listen to the spacecraft activities as it was going on. Cool. And NASA would always wake the astronauts up with music. So if they'd been in a long sleep period and they were going to wake them up, then they'd play a rock tune or something like that. And so that would get retransmitted on amateur radio frequencies. That's why that exception exists. Codes and ciphers. You can't obscure the meaning of a communication in amateur radio. And I know that radio that you just bought from China has a scrambler button on it. Don't use it. No. That's not allowed in amateur radio. There is an exception. Control commands for radio control models, and if you're controlling a satellite in space, those can be encrypted and not public. Otherwise, you have to use generally accepted known modes of operation. Gary, FT8, isn't that a code? Isn't that a digital sequence and whatnot? Yes, but it's known. And it doesn't obscure the meaning. Anyone who understands what that is, they can always decode that transmission. News gathering. You can't help news organizations produce their news broadcasts with this exception. And this happened in Western North Carolina just about a year ago. except when life or property is at stake. Then amateur radio information could be utilized and rebroadcast by broadcast organizations to disseminate news information to the general public. It's rare, but it can happen. And you yourself, you can't broadcast. And it's defined as transmitting to the general public. That is prohibited with, of course, there's always these exceptions. If you're going to be doing code practice, information bulletins, or transmissions necessary for emergency communications, then it's possible for you to just broadcast without having another station at the other end. More rules. This is the Post and Telecommunications rule. Ham radio is not a substitute for commercial communications channels. You can't make regular transmissions when other means are available. Okay, the internet has superseded all of this, but these are the rules. All right, last questions for tonight. So under which of the following circumstances are one-way transmissions by an amateur station prohibited?
Delta.
Bravo.
No.
Bravo.
What they're looking for here is Bravo. You can't broadcast. There's no broadcasting. So I don't like the way this question is worded, but that's what we got. And when is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to obscure their meaning?
Charlie.
Delta.
Yeah, Charlie. Only when transmitting control commands to either space stations or radio control craft. And under what conditions is an amateur station authorized to transmit music?
Alpha.
Alpha.
This is the rule when incidental to an authorized retransmission of manned spacecraft communications. And when may amateur radio operators use their stations to notify other amateurs of the availability of equipment for sale or trade?
Delta.
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 Yeah, when you're selling amateur radio equipment, not your car, but amateur radio equipment, and not on a regular basis. And what, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmission of language that may be considered indecent or obscene?
Bravo.
Yeah, any such language is prohibited. All right, let's see if you can remember this one. What types of amateur stations can automatically retransmit the signals of other amateur stations? We know one for sure. I'll give it to you. It's the repeater. That's its job.
Delta.
Auxiliary stations are remote receivers for repeaters, so that'd be two. And space stations, PACSATs, for example, repeat digital packet information. So yes, indeed, D. Repeater, auxiliary, and space stations can automatically retransmit signals from other stations. In which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating that station?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Yeah, when it's incidental to classroom instruction. And when may amateur stations transmit information in support of broadcasting, program production, or news gathering, assuming no other means are available?
Alpha.
Delta.
Not Delta. There is,
Alpha.
it is Alpha, the exception. When there's directly related to the immediate safety of human life, it's an emergency situation, or the protection of property. And there was a lot of property destruction up in western North Carolina from Hurricane Helene. And communications systems were down. So amateur radio played a vital role. And how does the FCC define broadcasting for the amateur radio service?
Delta.
Delta.
Yeah, transmissions that are intended for reception by the general public. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of Chapter 8. You made it. I'm very proud of you. And I just want to put a little promo here for the review website from the American Radio Relay League. You can start taking practice tests here. Here's the URL here at the bottom. And we've got one more chapter that we'll talk about next week, which is safety, which is, I think, probably one of the more important chapters. But it's at the end of the book, so that's where we have it. And I'm going to try to convince you that amateur radio is an adventure. And somehow my own monitor here got off. Yeah, it's on the speaker view. I want the gallery view so I can see all you. There you go. All right. Are there any questions or comments before we go tonight? I was going to do a sample high-frequency transmission like we did last week, but I thought actually it's probably better. I'm going to give you links in the email I'll send out tomorrow to my YouTube channel, to a playlist of QSOs that I've already made. And I think you'll get more information from those QSOs than you would have of us just blindly trying to make a QSO.
They're good. They're good.
Any other comments or questions?
I just on the third party thing.
Yeah.
When I was in the military, I had to make a phone call. This is before computers, and
Yep.
they called it a Mars call.
Yep.
Is that through ham radio also?
That was via ham radio. It's the military affiliate radio service, and it's amateur radio operators that volunteered to carry phone voice messages from Vietnam or from other overseas locations, and it still exists. And it's not as popular because of the internet, but it's still around.
Okay.
Yeah, I last Wednesday night,
Right.
Gary, I was listening at one of the nets, and some guy did his call sign and stuff, and the net control just like jumped all over him because he was saying something about emergency traffic, and I was like, wow, is it that serious? No, and it was just your normal net check-in, but he jumped all over that guy just because the guy was apparently thinking that the net was starting. He just really reamed that poor guy.
Okay, well, I don't know the circumstances there. If the station if they had emergency traffic, the net should have suspended operations and taken the traffic, gotten the information. Most importantly, the location where that station is. What is that location? Because then they could send help to that location. So, yeah, I don't know if that was the best way to do it.
I don't know exactly what had happened, but the net control was like, do you have emergency traffic? And the guy thought that the net was starting. So there was some confusion in what was going on.
So he did not have emergency traffic. So the net control station was saying, stations with emergency traffic come now, and he came on board, yeah. So, okay, yeah, he was out of step. It could have been handled a little bit more diplomatically, but okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah, just by me sitting there listening at this stuff, I'm learning.
Listening, you learn a lot. Absolutely, you learn how things work. So remember, yeah.
Last night I was listening to the people in Anderson, and as the net controller was asking people to check in, they would come in with their call sign, and then they would say negative, negative. What was the negative, negative?
Okay, a lot of nets, certainly in this upstate area, do this. They're asking two questions. And the net's been around for so long that everybody uses the shorthand. Do you have formal traffic for the net? Is the first question. Do you have a message that you want us to pass to the national traffic system? Negative. And will you stay around for a rag chew session at the end where everybody just does a round table and talks about whatever's happened in their day? If you don't want to stay around, then you say negative. So negative, negative means no traffic, no, I'm not going to stay around. But you have to know that, and that's what it means.
I have a question.
Yes.
There's a word used called, quote, phone in some of the literature, and what's the context of phone? Is it like just microphone? Is it differentiating from something else?
It's voice communications.
Voice. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I thought. Just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify.
Yeah. Radio telephone.
Okay, gotcha.
All right.
I thank y'all for what you do.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so proud of you all. When we first opened the book, you looked at it and went, but you're doing great. You've been given the right answers. And again, I'm just so proud of you. So read, please, Chapter 9, Safety, for next week. And we'll also then take a practice test together, and you're doing fine. All right? Let's get out of here early. 73, y'all. Great to see you.